Welcome, friends. This is A Course in Miracles, Palm Beach Study Group. Today we're on Chapter 13, Section 2, page 239 in the text. The Guiltless Son of God. The ultimate purpose of projection is always to get rid of guilt. Yet, characteristically, the ego attempts to get rid of guilt from its viewpoint only. For much as the ego wants to retain guilt, you find it intolerable, since guilt stands in the way of your remembering God, whose pull is so strong that you cannot resist it. On this issue, then, the deepest split of all occurs. For if you are to retain guilt, as the ego insists, you cannot be you. Only by persuading you that it is you could the ego possibly induce you to project guilt and thereby keep it in your mind. So the reason it says that if you retain guilt, you cannot be you, because you are a spiritual being. That's your true self. And you cannot be a spiritual being if you're going to retain guilt and hang on to the ego. The ego wants to make you think that you are the ego or that the ego is you instead of being spirit. But it can't be both ways. You cannot serve two masters. So it's telling us that the key to being a spiritual being is to release ourselves from the guilt that the ego created. Paragraph 2. Yet consider how strange a solution the ego's arrangement is. You project guilt to get rid of it, but you are actually merely concealing it. Do you experience, you do experience the guilt, but you have no idea why. On the contrary, you associate it with a weird assortment of ego ideals, which the ego claims you have failed, yet you have no idea that you are failing the Son of God by seeing him as guilty. Believing you are no longer you, you do not realize that you are failing yourself. So the primary guilt that the ego set up was when we had the mad thought of thinking that we could separate ourselves from God, which created the ego in the first place. And then the ego said, oh no, look at what you did. You separated yourself from God. Oh, you bad person. And God's going to punish you now. And that's where we get the idea of hell, that we're going to hell after death if we're not saved, that God's going to punish us. But none of that is true. First of all, we did not separate, or we are not separated from God. We never have been, we never will be. We are still the spiritual beings that God created us to be. The ego guilt trip is just an illusion, it's a dream. And that's why we have to get rid of the guilt. We have to realize that no, I don't have to be guilty because I never did what the ego is trying to make me believe I did. I never did separate myself from God. That's an impossibility. I am a spiritual being. I'm not just a human ego being. So that's why it says, believing you are no longer you, you do not realize that you are failing yourself. If you believe that you are not a spiritual being, you're just failing yourself. Any questions, comments? Paragraph 3. The darkness of your hidden cornerstones holds your belief in guilt from your awarenesses. For in that dark and secret place is the realization that you have betrayed God's Son by condemning him to death. You do not even suspect this murderous but insane idea lies hidden there, for the ego's destructive urge is so intense that nothing short of the crucifixion of God's Son can ultimately satisfy it. It does not know who the Son of God is because it is blind. Yet let it perceive guiltlessness anywhere, and it would try to destroy it because it is afraid. So, this whole belief in guilt and all is all subconscious. It's not something we go around and think about during the day. We don't go around and consciously think, "Oh, I'm just guilty because I separated myself from God." I mean, all of this is happening on a subconscious level in the ego mind, and like sentence 3 says, you do not even suspect this murderous but insane idea lies hidden there. And that's what studying the book is helping us to realize that, yes, these subconscious thoughts are in us, and we need to bring them to the surface, and we need to eliminate them from our subconscious mind and clean it out, and clean the ego out of our mind. Paragraph 4. Much of the ego's strange behavior is directly attributable to its definition of guilt. To the ego, the guiltless are guilty. Those who do not attack are its enemies, because by not valuing its interpretation of salvation, they are in an excellent position to let it go. They have approached the darkest and deepest cornerstone in the ego's foundation, and while the ego can withstand your rising all else to question, it guards this one secret with its life, for its existence depends on keeping this secret. So it is the secret that we must look upon, for the ego cannot protect you against truth, and in its presence, the ego is dispelled. Simply put, the ego doesn't want us to realize that we're a spiritual being and that we're completely innocent and have absolutely nothing to be guilty about, because at that point, the ego disappears, and it's like it lost itself, and it wants to hang on and struggle and do everything it can to keep us embedded in its insane thought system. because it's struggling for its own survival. And yet it's just a dream. Questions, comments? Yes, Ed.
I'm kind of confused by this. We're walking around with guilt, but we don't know we're walking around with guilt. It's not
Like
the surface. So how do you bring the guilt to the surface, or attempt to bring the guilt to the surface? And what are we supposed to be guilty of? I'm not following this very well.
Yes, it is the subconscious. What we feel guilty about is we feel guilty that we separated ourselves from God,
But
that we became human beings, that we're not the spiritual beings that we were created to be. We became human beings in bodies. We separated ourselves from God. And so we feel guilty about that in our subconscious mind. People think that they are their bodies. People think that they are human beings. We're being taught here that that's not true. It just appears that way. It's an illusion. It's a dream. The reality is that we're spiritual beings. We're not our bodies. We're immortal spiritual beings. We cannot and never will die. We're guiltless spiritual beings because we never did separate ourselves from God. We are a part of God. We are the child of God. We are the Son of God. We are the Christ. And we need to embrace that in our conscious mind to make that real for us again in our minds, because we've been overtaken by our human minds thinking that we are bodies and that we're going to die and that we could go to hell for our sins. And all of that is not true. All of that is illusion. All of that is ego.
okay.
I have a, I want, so I don't know, this is a very basic example. So separation from God could be something as simple as gossip, jealousy, hatred. Those to me would be examples of separating from God. Because that's not, yeah, that, I mean, that's, I'm talking in living on this earth kind of terms, everyday kind of terms, I think. I'm not looking at the bigger picture. I'm just saying that when we indulge in gossip, it was, we are not acting godly. We are in ego. We are projecting to other people about another person. And that would be what it says in the first couple of chapters. That would be, you know, that projection is a cause for guilt. Because I mean, who wants to be known for, who wants to be gossiping all the time, or who wants to be using derogatory conversation about other people or towards the world? So I think those, to me, are everyday examples of being separated from God. And what I'm finding these days lately, the more words I use, nice words, loving words, thoughts, kind thoughts, the further I get away, the closer I feel to God. That's my 2 cents worth.
Very good, Helen.
Thank you, Helen.
You're welcome.
Yes, the ego behavior outpictures as jealousy, hatred, violence, anger, all of the negativity. And yes, if it's negative gossip and all of that, name calling, prejudice, um, thinking that you're better than somebody else, looking down upon people, criticizing people, all of that's ego behavior. And all of that does point to the idea of being separate from God, because God would never exhibit any of those behaviors. And when you realize that you are a spiritual being and you do your best to align your behavior with your spiritual self, then you do not engage in those behaviors. Instead, you engage in loving behaviors and being helpful and kind and non-judgmental, and the positive aspects that are godlike. And that's how you can tell. It's kind of like a test. You can ask yourself, how did I behave today? Did I do anything, any ego behavior? Did I get angry? Was I jealous? Was I unkind? Was I derogatory? Was I prejudiced? Any of that? If I was, then, well, I have to work on that, because that's all ego behavior. Whereas if you can say, well, no, I did pretty good today. I didn't do any of those ego things, and on the contrary, I would try to be helpful and kind and considerate to people and to myself. And so I'm making progress. And eventually we'll get to the point of where we're exhibiting as close to 100% of spiritual behavior as humanly possible. And then we'll make that final step in transition where we're completely in spirit mind, and we have completely let go of ego mind. And that can be done while still in the body. Jesus is an example of that. Jesus made that transition, had his complete transition when he was 30 years old, reached enlightenment, and that's when he began his teaching, his ministry. And for the next 3 years, he went around teaching and doing miracles and trying to help people out of ego. But he was an enlightened being while still in the body for those last 3 years of his incarnation. And he told us, he said, greater things than this you can do. This was what he tried to teach us. He says, I'm not I'm not anything special. I'm your brother. I'm just like you. If I can do it, you can do it. Just follow me. In other words, follow what I'm teaching you. And now, with the Course of Miracles, Jesus has come back again in the 20th century by giving us this book to clarify his teachings for 2,000 years later. And it's the same message. If you follow the guidelines that I'm giving you, you can get out of the ego just the way I did and become an enlightened spiritual being, just like I did. Follow me. Yes, Ed.
I have appreciation of that, but day to day, I'm faced with the news of or the experience with the current political situation and the politicians, the selfish, non-representative people that we have in government on a continuous basis, and I can't help to react to that. I can't help. I feel frustrated. They have created these protections for themselves that you go to a county commission meeting and you get to speak 3 minutes. The developer gets to speak 25 minutes. And the place is 6 or 7 cops around, and the plastic up that they put in there to protect themselves from COVID is probably still going to be there to protect themselves. They're on the 4th floor. They have secret passages to their parking. These people, I mean, we're just faced with this stuff every day, and it's just, I can't just be a spiritual being and not react to this stuff, because I'm seeing the earth being destroyed. I'm seeing these politicians giving themselves to money. Money's influencing everything in our government today. I don't even doubt that they've got a tax break for giving campaign contributions. I mean, the corporations, I'm so frustrated and so angry. I can't.
Ed, you can do it. I have faith in you. You can do it. That frustration, that those accusations that no offense, that you were dispelling on these people are what we're talking about. And the other part, and you'll see later on in the book, there's a whole big section about seeing. And so once we begin to see what this political system is, there's many ways that you can rid yourself of that frustration. But it's a process, and it takes a long time. You do not have to change the whole system by yourself. You don't even have to change the system. All you have to do is change how you look at it.
But the system just keeps getting worse and worse. Democracy's going down.
Turn the channel. Shut the TV off.
I'm involved in getting an amendment to the Constitution about clean water. Water doesn't regenerate itself. We're still dealing with the same water we had during the dinosaurs. I'm looking at this situation where Big Sugar's burning and making people sick, and they get away with it, and they keep making big campaign contributions, $20 million a year. That stuff.
Ed, if I may, Helen, if I may.
Yeah.
Okay. We need to get back to the Course. And all that I can say regarding this is that I know that it's very difficult, especially when you're personally involved in these situations, like Ed is on a day-to-day basis. But the key here is within yourself. Yes, it's frustrating. I mean, it was frustrating for Jesus too. He talked about the Pharisees and the hypocrites and the rulers of the temple. It was the same situation as we have today. It's just different names, different people, but it's the same thing. But he said to us, love your enemy. In other words, you have to learn how to work within that system and dispel your anger and turn it into love. You have to look at these people and say, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. I see them as spiritual beings, and I project that for them. And hopefully they'll see themselves as spiritual beings soon enough, because when they do, they'll stop acting like this. They'll stop acting in ego behavior. And so we need to project that to them. What's important is how we react. If we react with our ego selves, we're just adding fuel to the fire. If we can react to all of these people and situations on a spiritual level, we're helping to put out the fires. And that's the key. The key is not what they're doing. The key is, what are you doing? How are you acting, reacting, interacting? Are you being the best spiritual being you can be while in the midst of all of this? It's nothing.
I agree, John. And Ed, I agree wholeheartedly with that. And what I see, I just like to say, Ed, take this in as you're listening. Just take it in, Ed. Take it in, because there's something very important there.
Okay.
All righty. Thank you, friends. Let's go on. I think we're on paragraph 5, are we not? Or are we on 4? Well, I'm just going to read paragraph 4 again.
Yeah, okay. That's good.
Much of the ego's strange behavior is directly attributable to its definition of guilt. To the ego, the guiltless are guilty. Those who do not attack are its enemies, because by not valuing its interpretation of salvation, they are in an excellent position to let it go. See, that's what we need to do. I did read this, so we'll go over it. If we don't attack our enemies, if we react spiritually to our enemies, we are in an excellent position to let the ego go, and that frightens the ego. So that's us. Those of us who are reacting spiritually have approached the darkest and deepest cornerstone in the ego's foundation. And while the ego can withstand your rising all else to question, it guards this one secret with its life, the secret of guilt. For its existence depends on keeping this guilty secret. So it is the secret that we must look upon, we must become conscious of, for the ego cannot protect you against truth, which is the truth is comes from spirit. And in truth, the presence of ego is dispelled. And that's our goal, to dispel the ego. So 5, in the calm light of truth, let us recognize that you believe you have crucified God's Son. You have not admitted to this terrible secret because you would still wish to crucify him if you could find him. Yet the wish has hidden him from you because it is very fearful, and so you are afraid to find him. You have handled this wish to kill yourself by not knowing who you are and identifying with something else. You have projected guilt blindly and indiscriminately, but you have not uncovered its source. For the ego does want to kill you, and if you identify with it, you must believe its goal is yours. So you see, we're caught in a catch-22 here. You know, a catch-22 is where you say, well, you can get out if you're insane, but if you think you're insane, then you can't be insane because no rational person would think he was insane. So you must be sane. So you can't get out. It just keeps, that's what catch-22 is. It just keeps going around and around in circles, and it's the snake swallowing its tail, the dog chasing its tail, you know. And that's how the ego works. The ego gives us all of these contradictions and tries to make us, so we got to break free of that. We got to say, no. That's not reality. The reality is that I'm a spiritual being, and I'm going to start behaving like a spiritual being. And I'm not going to allow the ego to get the better of me. Number 7. This course has explicitly stated that its goal for you is happiness and peace.
I think you skipped over number 6.
I did. Oh, yes, thank you. Okay, number 6. I have said that the crucifixion is the symbol of the ego. When it was confronted with the real guiltlessness of God's Son, it did attempt to kill him. And the reason it gave was that guiltlessness is blasphemous to God. To the ego is God. And guiltlessness must be interpreted as the final guilt that fully justifies murder. You do not yet understand that any fear you may experience in connection with this course stems ultimately from this interpretation. But if you will consider your reactions to it, you will become increasingly convinced that this is so. Why did they crucify Jesus? For blasphemy. That was his sin. They said, oh, you said you're the king of the Jews. That's blasphemous. You said you're the Son of God. That's blasphemous. you attack the priests in the temple. That's blasphemous. So the crucifixion is the symbol of the ego. The ego does want to kill us. And the ego wants to make us feel guilty.
Sometimes when I hear that the ego wants to kill us, I interpret that as to say the ego wants to keep us unhappy.
Yes. Yes. The ego wants to keep us entrapped in anger, hatred, jealousy, fear, guilt. And that is what kills us.
Yeah.
So paragraph 7. This course has explicitly stated that its goal for you is happiness and peace. Yet you are afraid of it. You have been told again and again that it will set you free, yet you sometimes react as if it is trying to imprison you. You often dismiss it more readily than you dismiss the ego's thought system. To some extent, then, you must believe that by not learning the course, you are protecting yourself. And you do not realize that it is only your guiltlessness that can protect you. And remember, originally he was speaking this directly to Helen Schucman. I mean, this whole course is a conversation that Jesus had with Helen. And she just wrote down this conversation. And we have to extrapolate it to ourselves now as we're studying it. So we have to put ourselves in Helen's shoes and say, well, he's speaking to me now, you know.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah. So we may be of a further we may be further along the path than Helen was at the time he said this to her.
Yeah, okay.
So don't be afraid of being guiltless, because that's what's going to get you out. That's what's going to get you free. Sentence 6. You do not realize that it is only your guiltlessness that can protect you. That can protect you from the ego. Number 8. The atonement has always been interpreted as the release from guilt. And this is correct if it is understood. Yet even when I interpret it for you, you may reject it and do not accept it for yourself. You have perhaps recognized the futility of the ego and its offerings, though you do. Let me start again. The atonement has always been interpreted as the release from guilt, and this is correct if it is understood. Yet even when I interpret it for you, you may reject it and do not accept it for yourself. You have perhaps recognized the futility of the ego and its offerings, but though you do not want them, you may not yet look upon the alternative with gladness. In the extreme, if you are afraid of redemption and you believe it will kill you, in the extreme, you are afraid of redemption and believe it will kill you. Make no mistake about the depth of this fear, for you believe that in the presence of truth, you might turn on yourself and destroy yourself.
Wow.
And that's the way the ego would have us play the game. The ego will do its best to have us destroy ourselves. And if you don't think that's true, look at how many people in the world have gone insane, have committed suicide, have lost themselves to their addictions that ultimately kill them, alcoholism, cancer from smoking, all kinds of stuff. You know, this is all a result of the ego's thought system. People would not behave in this fashion if they realized that they're spiritual, eternal, guiltless beings and don't have to buy in to all of the ego's falderall.
I sometimes think, I wonder if this is also about suffering. You know, sometimes we suffer as a people, and it's not necessary. It kills us.
Yes.
This is excellent. I say this every week, I know, but it's just absolutely excellent.
Yes, it's one excellent paragraph after the other. From paragraph 9, our last paragraph. Little child, this is not so. Again, Jesus is addressing us as the little child. In other words, we're in the state of learning. You know, a little child just has to learn in order to grow. And he has compassion and sympathy for us, and he loves us. And to him, we are a little child that needs to learn. And he addresses us, little child, this is not so. Your guilty secret is nothing. And if you will but bring it to the light will dispel it. And then no dark cloud will remain between you and the remembrance of your Father. For you will remember his guiltless Son, who did not die because he is immortal. And you will see that you were redeemed with him and have never been separated from him. In this understanding lies your remembering, for it is the recognition of love without fear. There will be great joy in heaven on your homecoming, and the joy will be yours. For the redeemed Son of Man is the guiltless Son of God, and to recognize him is your redemption. I'm going to reread that. Little child, this is not so. Your guilty secret is nothing. And if you will but bring it to the light, to the Spirit, the light, the Spirit will dispel it. And then no dark cloud will remain between you and your Father. For you will remember yourself, who did not die, because you are immortal. And you will see that you are redeemed and have never been separated from God and from yourself. In this understanding lies your remembering. And the Course says over and over again, it's just a matter of remembering who you are. That's ultimately what you have to do. You just have to remember who you are, what you are. For it is the recognition of love without fear, of spirit without ego. There will be great joy in heaven on your homecoming, and the joy will be yours. You're the one who will have the great joy when you remember what you are. For the redeemed Son of Man is the guiltless Son of God. And to recognize him is your redemption. To recognize yourself is your redemption. Questions, comments?
It's a great way to end this.
Thank you both. I am going to work at applying the love to these people who don't know what they're doing. It's not going to be easy, but I see the purpose in it. And I see that being angry and frustrated with all this stuff is harmful to me physically.
Absolutely.
Yes. So,
Ed, you're in a position to do a great service for all of humanity, because you do put yourselves in these situations. You do go to these commission meetings and what have you. And if you can stand in the midst of it, in the midst of all of the fear and the lies and the corruption,
Right.
all of that, and project love of spirit to these people, you are doing a tremendously great service for all of humanity.
I'll do my best.
Thank you.
I love that picture. I can see that picture on my mind. It's a beautiful one.
It is.
I particularly love this sentence. You're remembering, for it is the recognition of love without fear.
Yes.
That to me should be capitalized. You know, it's such a simplistic statement, but it's so bold, so strong.
Well, I suggest you write it out in capital letters and stick it on the mirror.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, friends.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
To the end of our meeting for today. So let's have a moment of silence and we'll stop the recording.